Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to my presentation. I'm Edo Kalam Purwira, college student of PEM Akamigas from Refinery Instrumentation Engineering. So the topic of my presentation today is control valve. Of course, it's an honor for me to discuss about this. To begin with, I'd like to share you about the body of the presentation. First, I will explain the meaning of the control valve, and then part of the control valve, control actions, and the application. Well, let's start with the first point. What is a control valve? Control valve is a power-operated device that modifies fluid flow in a process control system. Control valve is an automatic valve that can regulate the flow in a piping system. Control valve can receive commands from analog or digital signals. It consists of a valve connected to an actuator mechanism that can change the position of the flow control element in the valve in response to signal from the controller. Many types of valve are often used. Each type of valve has its own function. The function is, first, to close and open the flow. If it is open, it has minimum flow resistance and pressure loss. Second, to regulate the flow by holding the flow with a change of direction or using a resistance. It can also be a combination of the two. Third, to prevent the backflow, to control pressure, and then for pressure relief. The second point is part of the control valve. Overall, basically a control valve has many parts, but we usually divide the control valve into main parts. First is actuator. Actuator is the part supplied by electrical power or air to move the valve, either opening or closing. So the actuator is part of the control valve that allows the valve to work according to the input received from the controller. There are several types of control valve based on the actuators, such as pneumatic actuator, electric actuator, hydraulic actuator, manual actuator, digital electronic actuator. Next is the body. Body parts is a place to control the fluid flow. There is a valve inside the body. It can also use as a seat of the control valve. Bonnet have a role as a buffer for the actuator and the place where the actuator and body are bound. And last, stem is a connecting rod between the actuator and the closure member. Control actions. First, air to open. The flow restriction increases with increased control signal value. At the control valve ATO, the position of pneumatic signal input is under the diaphragm. When a 3 psi pneumatic signal is given, the valve closes the fluid flow. And if the input signal is increased to 15 psi, the applied pressure will trigger the diaphragm so that the spring is pulled and moves the stem up. Therefore, the valve will be fully open. Air to close. The flow restriction decreases with increased control signal value. On the other hand, at the ATC control valve, the air inlet position is above the diaphragm. So if we give a pneumatic input of 15 psi, the valve will close the fluid pad and stop the flow. Application on the process system. In the application of control valves, I will discuss the control system on 4 variables using the control valve. These 4 variables include pressure, flow, level, and temperature. Flow control. The fluid pushed by the pump will flow to the right. In this flow, the fluid will pass through a flow sensor. The data received by the sensor will be converted by a flow transmitter into an electrical signal and forwarded to the control room. In this example, we call it a flow indicator controller. Then the controller will send a command signal to the control valve. Then the signal will be received by the control valve, and the valve will move according to the command sent to get the desired value. Level control. The fluid enters through F inlet to fill the vessel. The level of the fluid will be measured by the level sensor, and then the data will be converted into an electrical signal. After the control room receives the measurement results, the controller will send a command signal to the control valve. Then the command is received by the control valve to regulate the flow so that the fluid flow in the vessel can be controlled. Temperature control. The temperature control system has a function for changing the base of the substance and the temperature of the variables that pass through it. So, the first step is that the cold fluid will pass through the heat exchanger to be heated at a certain temperature according to the set point. On the other hand, the hot steam will pass through the heat exchanger and then will change space to become condensate. In this case, the control valve will act to regulate the flow of steam so that heat exchange can be controlled. Well, that completes my presentation. I hope my material today can be useful for all people. Thank you very much for listening. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.